And there is recording in progress. Very good. So I hope you're all well. So I changed the title of my talk when I saw the motto of your institution, which is Ex Umbra et Solem. Let's see if this... OK, j'ai compris. Voilà. So my Latin is poor, but I take that to mean from darkness into the light, which is the topic of my talk. So it's based on a project that I hope to finish very soon, and it builds on previous work of mine and my colleagues here in Brussels and elsewhere. So my problem is dark matter, and as you know, this is an unsolved problem. So like many people, I guess I wish we had learned things about dark matter from the high energy physics experiment, observatories, etc., but we don't. I mean, we've not. So this and other consideration have caused a sort of paradigm shift in the community.
Sorry, Michael. It's okay. Yes.
Yes, no, it was blank because it was supposed to be dark matter. Okay. So basically, instead of focusing on a grand picture, which may exist but is essentially unestablished as of today, more and more the community is using a more bottom-up approach. One such approach is to consider the possibility of hidden or dark sector. So this is not a new idea. However, it's a simple and quite a natural framework, especially when dealing with dark matter. So the basic idea is that on the side of the standard model or visible sector, there are also standard model singlet states. These states, they don't have to be super heavy. This is one of the interesting features of dark sector framework. But more importantly for me, the dark sector is supposed to contain a dark matter candidate. Another aspect that will be important for my talk is that this dark sector, which to a large extent is disconnected from the visible sector, may have a temperature that is different from that of the visible sector. So I will usually use a mostly visible sector for the standard model. Huh? So one of the things I'd like to do in this talk is to focus or to explore the possibility that this temperature may have been much larger than that of the standard model. So now at least we know that the dark sector and the visible sector interact through gravity. At least this is how we know that there is dark matter. But there are other possibilities. And the different possibilities are called portals. Basically, they are the different natural way of coupling the standard model to singlet states. For the sake of the talk, but also because it's a very concrete model that I've used quite often, I will use a framework which is called, or it may be called, dark QED. Basically, it's everybody's model for dark sector. That model is very simple. It's basically a copy of QED with a few small changes. One key advantage of this scenario is that the dark matter particle is naturally stable, basically because of fermionic number conservation. And the dark fermions, they interact with a dark photon. Now, a small departure compared to QEDs that I will assume that the dark photon have a mass. That's an extra free parameter. Then several things can happen in this framework. Of course, the dark matter can interact with the dark photons. This is, for instance, relevant if I want to consider annihilation of the dark matter into dark photons. Important here is the fact that this process is controlled by basically the equivalent of the fine structure constant, but in the hidden sector. Again, this is taken to be a free parameter. It's a bottom-up approach. Next, the standard model and the dark sector are coupled to each other through something which is called the mixing parameter. And this is basically the portal. It means that the ordinary photons can mix with the dark sector or the dark photons. And this is controlled by this parameter. Now, when we consider interaction between the standard model and the dark sector, it's not only this parameter which is relevant, but also the dark sector electric charge, so to speak. So the relevant combination is the following, which can be written like that, and it's usually called the Milli charge. So we can think of the dark matter particle as being Milli charge particles. And of course, last, the dark photons, they can decay into standard model particles. Now that process involves only the mixing parameter, because here the coupling is fixed. It's basically the electric charge in the standard model. The control parameter here is then epsilon simply. And this is, for instance, relevant when we consider, in particular, the decay of the dark photon, again, taken to be a massive particle. Now, the rule of the game is then to determine the dark matter abundance, given some choices of parameter. Okay. So, to do that, what I need to do is to solve a bunch of Boltzmann equations, which involves not only the dark matter, but also the dark photons and the energy that can be transferred between one and the other and the visible sector. So these are a bit, the equations are a bit, they're not very complex equations, but they are a bit involved. So let me put forward a sort of a schematic representation of what is going on and what could happen when we solve Boltzmann equation. So this is represented schematically as follows. Of course, we have the standard model particles, we have the dark matter, but also we have the dark photons. So we can think of the blob as being a kind of a reservoir. Okay. This is standard model particles that can go into standard model particles. And then these different reservoirs are connected with what I call connectors, but basically they are the three control parameters: the Milli charge, the mixing parameter, and here in the hidden sector, the equivalent of the electric charge in dark QED. Now, this representation is freely inspired from something called Petri nets. So Petri nets is a kind of mathematical structures with reservoir, connectors, but also processes. What is meant by processes is basically the fact that you have directed flows between the different reservoirs. So in our case, the processes correspond to what we usually call processes. For instance, the dark matter particles can go into standard model particles and vice versa. And this is controlled by this thing. And the fact that we have an arrow here basically means that this is the relevant process and that the relevant process goes two ways. And basically, this is a synonym for meaning that the processes are in equilibrium. Another instance is the following. So here, the dark matter particles can be produced from the standard model particles. There is a single arrow, it goes in this direction, and that is supposed to mean that the process is out of equilibrium. Okay, so it goes in one direction, but not in the other direction, so it's an out of equilibrium process. So here you probably recognize the two basic scenarios for the dark matter abundance. So what we call the freeze out actually correspond to a situation where the control parameter, the connector, is a quite large number, basically an order one coupling. And in that case, of course, we know that the abundance of the dark matter, so what we call the abundance is, I mentioned that early on, but it's the ratio of the energy, the number density of the dark matter to the entropy of the universe. And this abundance scales like 1 over the relevant coupling to the square. So the stronger the coupling, the smaller the abundance. This is the usual freeze-out regime or freeze-out mechanism. Conversely, if the parameter, again here the Milli charge, is small, we may be in what is called the freezing regime. Okay. In that case, if you increase the parameter, well, you increase the relic abundance or the abundance of the dark matter. And then, of course, seen as a sort of a phase diagram for the abundance as a function of the parameter, you know, if you increase here in this situation, you have equilibrium. Here it's out of equilibrium. So that means that somewhere, for some value of the parameter, you reach equilibrium. So basically, you encompass the different possible situations by changing parametrically what is going on. So these are the two popular, well-known, and very much used possible ways to produce dark matter. Another way, which is less popular, less familiar, but it's going to be important for the rest of the story, is the following. You may have that the dark matter is in equilibrium in the hidden sector. So that's basically controlled by this parameter. And then just through the usual way you do a freeze out by the expansion of the universe, etc., you may have a freeze out of this interaction in the hidden sector. And then, of course, the abundance of the dark matter is fully controlled by the abundance of these particles, which is controlled by whatever is the temperature in this hidden sector. So this scenario is so-called the so-called secluded freeze-out. Secluded being that we have to imagine that instead of having dark matter being part of a broader picture of the standard model, basically electroweak states would do that. I mean, they have other one coupling to standard model particles. Here we may have a totally secluded parallel world with dark matter, etc., etc. Okay. Another instance, and basically what I'm doing here is I'm trying to illustrate the fact that you can explore different scenarios by using this representation, schematic representation. But of course, this is just underlying the fact that we have Boltzmann equation with different parameters. So another example I take this opportunity to put forward is a mechanism that we discovered, so to speak, a couple of years ago, me and my collaborator. So it's a bit like a freezing in the sense that everything happens out of equilibrium, but it happens in two steps. First, the standard model particle produce the dark photons, and this is controlled by this parameter. And then the dark photons themselves have collisions, and they create the dark matter. So in that setup, everything is out of equilibrium. There is no thermalization whatsoever, etc. But it's a way to explore the possibilities. So basically, it's an organizing principle, if you want. And we've used this organizing principle to study all the possible way of producing dark matter from the standard model. And I insist, from the standard model, okay? And basically, we have identified different regimes. we use numerotation a bit like in string theory. We have type 1A, type 1B, type 2, type 2B, etc., etc. Well, it goes beyond string theory actually because we have more things. But anyway, so basically we have identified 5 different regimes. Okay, sequential freezing being this one, etc. And all the way dark matter can be realized is basically based on this classification, which we think is complete, and is basically supported by all the ways of drawing lines between the different reservoirs, etc. Basically, in following this following of Petri net representation of the Boltzmann equations. So it's a graphical way to classify things. But of course, what we do at the end is to solving a Boltzmann equation. So we can draw figures like this. We call that a phase diagram, but basically it's a representation in the parameter space. So here you have the Milli charge. Here you have the fine structure constant in the hidden sector. And for fixed dark matter mass and mass of the dark photon, well, all these, the locus of all possible dark matter candidates are given by this line. Here, the dark matter would be overabundant. Here, it would be underabundant. And then you have different regime, freezing, freeze out, the standard regimes, and possibly different regimes in between. So let me focus now on this regime here. Okay, something called reannihilation. So what is reannihilation? Is
I'm sorry. Can I ask you something?
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
The previous plot.
Yes.
These control lines don't depend on the initial conditions.
So there are different assumptions. For instance, for freezing, the basic assumption is that we have very little dark matter in the hidden sector. So that's the usual vanilla assumption about the abundance of the dark matter. So you have to imagine that, and I will come back to that. So perhaps we can discuss that even a bit later. But that's the basic assumption. Here, you have basically no choice because the coupling is so strong that the dark matter or the hidden sector, if you want, thermalizes with the visible sector. And so everything is set by the equilibrium conditions. So there are two sides of this coin. Either we assume very little dark matter to begin with, or we have no choice. There is a lot, and then we have the usual freeze out. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And just to clarify, the alpha prime is... Yes. I'm a little confused. Kappa is proportional to the mixing.
So kappa involves the mixing parameter. It's given here. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
While here it's purely, if you want, here it's purely the coupling in the hidden sector, and this is how the hidden sector can interact with the visible sector.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question. So I go back to my slides. So what is a reannihilation? Okay, I have a call, so I hope it will be okay for the rest of the talk. But basically, what is important is that, for these scenarios, there is no equilibrium. For this scenario, there is full equilibrium. And in between, we have situations in which the hidden sector is also in equilibrium, but within itself, but at the temperature which is lower than the temperature of the visible sector. Excuse me. So it's sort of intermediate situation, okay, with different temperature. So here is an instance of the evolution of the abundance, etc. But basically, this is to emphasize the fact that the temperature of the hidden sector is smaller than that of the visible sector. Here is another instance of that kind of situation. So this is not a work of mine, it's by Dimopoulos and collaborators, etc. But it's a scenario in which the dark sector also reaches thermal equilibrium, but at temperature which is distinct from that of the visible sector. So let me give you, so the details are not very important for us, but let me give you a schematic representation again of what is going on. And it goes like that. So basically, you have during inflation production of dark photons. They are massive particles. So it's non-conformal coupling, etc. You can have substantial production of these particles. And then these particles basically through a Schwinger mechanism, but I will not dwell into that. They create dark matter particles. Basically, it's a pair creation process in the dark sector. You have thermalization, etc. But at a temperature which eventually is less than that of the visible sector. And the reason for that is because the inflaton is supposed to decay 100% of the time into the visible sector. So that's a schematic representation of the physical situation they consider. Okay. Of course, this is an interesting scenario, but nothing prevents the situation in which instead of having the inflaton decaying 100% into the standard model, well, perhaps the inflaton could also decay partially into the cold sector. That's basically the simplest way to have different temperature between the visible sector and the dark sector. This is actually called asymmetric heating, and it's well, not much studied, but studied scenario. Okay. So that brings me to another logical possibility, which has not been much studied so far, which is that the inflaton, what if the inflaton decays mostly into the dark sector? Okay, in a way, this is more economical, but okay, I mean, we could argue about that. It's not very important in the sense that basically, I mean, often people think of the inflaton as being part of a hidden sector. Well, if it's part of a hidden sector, better have just one single hidden sector, and then the inflaton decays, or yes, decays, and thus eats mostly the hidden sector, which of course means that instead of having a cold dark sector with a temperature which is less than that of the visible sector, now we have a hot dark sector. Now, that's a very specific situation, but it's also potentially a very bad one, because of course our universe is hot, or was hot, at least we know that from a BBN. And if we know anything about the dark sector, is that it should not be too dominant, at least early in the universe. It can become more dominant when after matter radiation equality. That is when the dark matter becomes an important part of the history universe, but certainly not before, not by the time of BBN. So that means, of course, that basically this kind of hot sector, dark sector scenario is fundamentally history, in the sense that it must be something that happened but is gone somehow. So technically, what we need to do is to eat the visible sector. Now, what is the situation I want to consider? I want to consider that this is the dark matter. These are the companion of the dark matter, but remember, they are like photons, even though they are massive. Okay, so potentially there are a lot of them. Okay, basically they carry most of the entropy of the universe early on. So I need to get rid of them. And so the big problem, or the problem I need to solve, is how the dark photons are going to transfer their energy into the visible sector. And this is the problem I will focus on. So basically, is from dark photons into light, which is the central topic of my talk. But it's a long introduction, but it's not that natural scenario, so it takes some time to motivate. So to summarize, basically what I'm going to discuss, I'm going to argue that there are two ways to eat the visible sector. The first possibility is that the dark photons here come into thermal equilibrium with the standard model. I will explain how that could happen. So basically, we will go from a hot dark sector with a temperature which is much larger than that of the visible sector, with basically dark photons in thermal equilibrium with the visible sector. Now, remember that the dark matter here is frozen out, basically. So they are just floating around, etc., just like ordinary dark matter. So it's basically, when I mean equilibrium, it's really only between the visible sector and the dark photons. That's one possibility. The second possibility is that the dark photon decays into standard model particles. Now, to be sure, both thermalization and decay will be driven by this process. So this process is basically the decay of the dark photon into standard model particles, here fermions, and the reverse process. Okay? The big difference is that thermalization will occur while the dark photons are still relativistic, while what I mean by decay per se means that the dark photons basically decay when they are non-relativistic. So I will insist on that several times. Hopefully it will become clearer. So to recap, what I will assume is that there is a dark sector with a temperature which is much larger than the temperature of the visible sector. And also I'm going to assume that it's a well-defined initial condition, so that the ratio of the two quantities is a well-defined condition, so it's basically a constant. Then I will assume that the dark matter, which belongs to the dark sector, is set by secluded freeze-out. So that will be annihilation of the dark matter into dark photons. Okay? And the story I'm going to summarize now in the rest of the talk start after freeze-out. And basically what I want to do is to track the dark photon abundance, the temperature ratio, and also something which is quite important is entropy production. And I will explain or recap or remind you why it's important. Okay. Of course, this is done by solving a set of Boltzmann equations. So the system could be very messy or very simple. So we've decided to make it simple by making a bunch of simplification. So basically, it's a fluid approximation. It's not 100% kasher, always good, but it's good enough to understand and learn what is going on. So basically, it's a set of Boltzmann equations that express the evolution of the abundance of the dark photons, their energy density, and also how the energy transfer is transferred to the visible sector. And of course, globally, energy is conserved, modulo the expansion of the universe. Now, look at these parameters here. So basically here, what we have is the decay rate of the dark photon. That's the decay rate at rest. And now we have these factors. And these factors, they are basically Boltzmann functions, the Bessel functions, sorry. They traditionally appear when you write Boltzmann equation using Maxwell-Boltzmann statistics. And basically, these factors, they take into account the fact that when the dark photons are relativistic, well, there is time dilation, and so the decay rate is smaller at large temperature than when they are essentially non-relativistic and at rest. Okay, so here are the equations, and then this is what you get when you solve the equations.
I'm sorry?
Yes?
Could you go back to...
Sure.
Yeah, there. So maybe I didn't understand very well the role or the, what is going on with the with the fermion dark matter because
okay, very good question. Yes,
I understood that there is a underlying process called a Schwinger pair production.
No. Okay, sorry.
I got confused.
The online thing, etc. So the Schwinger thing was just to show that there are other scenarios considered by different people for which it's natural to imagine that a dark sector can have a temperature which is different from that of the visible sector. So here, what I'm doing is totally perturbative, not Schwinger, etc. Okay. But then I come back to your first question. So your first question is about the hypothesis I'm making. Oops. Oh, the arrow is gone. I don't know where it is. Shit. Where's the arrow? Okay, my pointer is gone. But basically, if you see, my story starts after dark matter freeze out. So what you have to imagine is that there is a hidden sector. It was in thermal equilibrium, dark matter and dark photons. Then dark matter start annihilating. Of course, there is a freeze out of that process, annihilation of the dark matter into dark photon. And so there is a remnant dark matter abundance in the hidden sector. But then you have a lot of dark photons, okay? And essentially, the energy density in that sector is much more than in visible sector. So what do you do? Well, you need to follow how the dark photons are going to transfer their energy to the visible sector. And this is what I want to do, okay?
Okay. Of course, you need that dark photons are lighter than dark matter, the fermion dark matter.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
Thank you again. Okay. So this is the kind of curves that we got. So we track many things, etc. It's a bit messy, so I'm going to explain that slowly step by step. Here's another instance. You change the parameter. For some reason, the pointer always goes away when I change. I don't know why. Okay, it will come back. Anyway, this is another possible solution. So as I said, it's a bit cluttered. So let me explain a little bit because I really like this problem. So let me focus on this. Where is my pointer? Okay, let me focus on this first possibility, which is what I call thermalization. So thermalization happens here when you see the arrow, the red arrow. I'm trying to get my pointer to come back, but I think it's a delay because of Zoom. Okay, anyway. So you see the arrow. This is where you have thermalization. Why is that thermalization? Because you see that the vertical axis is the ratio of temperature, T prime over T. So if you follow the green curve, okay, we start with a large ratio, and then it decreases, and then it reaches 1, okay? And this is what we call a thermalization. Then, okay. Okay. Then there are different structures. So still focusing on voilà, it's back. Very good. I don't know why it keeps hiding. Anyway, so you see, I mean, we have all the features I want to have at so this is the scale factor. So evolution of the universe in this direction. This is possible temperature. It's a given initial condition. So I start with a large temperature, okay? And then at some point, it starts to decrease the temperature ratio. So I call that the beginning of the transfer of heat, basically. And then we have thermalization, okay? Then after thermalization, what I can see, on this curve, I have the energy density of the dark photons. And basically, if I track here, basically, most of the energy density is into the dark photons. And then at some point, they become less abundant. And then eventually they become non-relativistic and their abundance becomes Boltzmann suppressed. That's an interesting feature, and it's totally general, which is that these particles, they start basically out of equilibrium. They start to transfer the energy density, they thermalize, but once they've thermalized, they stay in thermal equilibrium, and so they track an equilibrium abundance. Another important aspect is that of the entropy that is produced in the process. Of course, the heating, I mean, we have a hot reservoir and a cold reservoir. We transfer heat, so it's a non-reversible process, so there is entropy production. So it's actually easy to evaluate the final entropy versus the initial entropy in this scenario. Basically, you use the fact that total energy is conserved, I mean the co-moving sense, of course. So this is the co-moving initial energy density dominated by the hidden sector. And this is the co-moving final energy density dominated by basically the standard model particles. So here, G here is the degeneracy parameter. There are a lot more supposedly standard model particles than particles from the hidden sector. So we have, in a good approximation, this is essentially a G here. And then the final entropy can be compared by just rescaling this relation, okay? And then if you do that, basic algebra gives that the final entropy is slightly larger than the initial entropy. The initial entropy being the entropy that was contained in the dark photons. And there is a simple rescaling by the fourth root of the ratio of the number of degrees of freedom. Something very basic. But then even if you take about of the order of 100 degrees of freedom for the standard model, okay, and the 3 degrees of freedom that have massive dark photons, this ratio, you know, is not very sensitive. It's the fourth root. So basically, the ratio is basically a factor of order 1. It's 2, basically, at most. So in this process, basically, which occurs if which occurs when the dark photons thermalize with the visible sector, and importantly, this happens before the dark photon becomes non-relativistic. Here we have the moment when the dark photon becomes non-relativistic. Well, but basically you have a little bit of entropy production. Sorry, I need to go back. Okay. So one other feature I'd like to put forward, and then I will be a bit more rapid for the other figure, is the following question, which is, when does the heat transfer start in this process? So basically, initially you have, you really have to picture that you have visible sector and hidden sector living side by side. The temperature basically redshifts because of the expansion of the universe, but there is no energy exchange. And then at some point it starts. The dark photon basically starts transferring energy to the visible sector. So there is heating. And that stops, of course, when they reach equilibrium. So to understand what happens, it's interesting to have a look at 2 other curves in this plot. And the first curve here is the ratio of the energy density in the visible sector to what is initially essentially the energy density in the hidden sector. Initially, this is very small because there is little energy density in the visible sector. But you see that when heating starts, of course, this energy density starts to increase. And then at some point, most of the energy density is in the visible sector as you need, okay? But now, what is interesting in it, of course, it's an important aspect, but what is interesting is that is when you look at this other curve. What is this curve? Is basically the decay rate of the dark photon over the expansion rate of the universe. So that's usually a super important ratio, because it tells you when a process is in equilibrium or out of equilibrium. So when you look at the curve here, this ratio is bigger than 1 here, is order 1 here, but it's smaller than 1 before. So basically, the dark photons and the visible sector, they are disconnected effectively because they cannot reach equilibrium. To reach equilibrium, you need this parameter to be order 1. But then, when you look at the two curves, this curve and that curve, you see that they overlap very precisely during all the process of heating. Okay, so that motivates to introduce or to consider or to focus on this parameter. So what is this parameter? It's the product of the ratio of energy densities times the decay rate over the expansion rate. Okay, so I told you that this parameter is smaller than 1 before equilibrium. Okay, so this number is initially small, but that parameter is not small. I mean, it's how much energy density I have in the hidden sector compared to the other sector. So to understand what happens, it's a different way of showing the same thing, basically. So for instance, look at the blue curve. So this is this product, this parameter here, okay? So what we see is that this parameter is initially small, much smaller than 1, increases. While it's increasing, effectively, the temperature ratio rests constant, so there is no heat transfer. And then at some point, it becomes order 1. At that moment, energy transfer starts. It stays 1 during all the duration of the heating. And then at some point, this parameter becomes order 1. And of course, this keeps increasing. And so the parameter increases again. So basically, what I want to put forward is that the transfer of energy from one sector to the other is controlled by this parameter. And heating, energy transfer, happens when this parameter is order 1. So what does that mean? Well, it's quite easy, actually, to understand. The two sectors are very feebly coupled. Okay, we are speaking here of two things that basically have very, very little interaction, but there is a lot of energy. And so even though the interaction is feeble, you can dump, if you have a lot of energy, you can dump a little bit in the other sector. This is why it's the important parameter is the product of the two things. Of course, you can have then different situations. For instance, imagine that this parameter is very large, then kappa can be larger than 1 from the outset. And this is what we see here in the figure. You see that, you know, for the kind of scenario I want to consider, there is a plateau. But if kappa is larger than 1 initially, okay, so the dashed curve is showing kappa, well, then we see that the temperature ratio is always evolving, basically. Okay, so in a sense, there is always a transfer of energy from one sector to the other because we have so much energy to transfer. So this is not new. It's actually precisely what happens during inflation. So during inflation, of course, there is, after inflation, zero or exponentially small energy in the visible sector or in the standard model. All the energy is in the inflaton field, which is oscillating. And then the inflaton is dumping very rapidly energy into the standard model particles. This is actually, or at least the usual assumption. And so what happens is that the temperature starts very, very, very fast to something called Tmax, maximal temperature. And then there is heating from inflaton decay. And then at some point, the inflaton decays for sure. That is, it becomes the decay rate of the inflaton becomes larger than the expansion rate. And this is the end of reheating of the universe. And we have basically exactly the same story here, but in a slightly different setting. So speaking of that, this is an instance of the second scenario, second possibility. My pointer is gone again, which is a situation in which the dark photon decays, or basically transfer its energy density. Okay, where is my pointer? It's really annoying, but okay. Okay, so basically, the key thing here is that the parameter epsilon here is much smaller. Okay, so it's all parametric, this problem. If epsilon is quite large, then the interaction between the visible sector and the dark sector is relatively larger. If epsilon is smaller, well, basically the dark photon has a much longer lifetime, and so it will decay later. And potentially this can happen when it's non-relativistic. Okay. Well, I mean, way after it has transferred energy to the visible sector. Okay. Okay, so my pointer doesn't want to come back. Perhaps it will eventually. So, voila. Ah, okay, there it is. Okay, so let me emphasize that. Okay, you see that it's basically, it starts with the same story. Okay, we have a plateau, etc. But then at some point along the heating, okay, you see that the temperature is still larger than that of the visible sector. Okay, the dark photon becomes non-relativistic. Okay, then the situation changes, etc. Basically, the transfer of energy will happen when the dark photon will decay, basically. So there is no thermalization, so to speak. Basically, just matter domination. The dark photons are non-relativistic. They over-dominate the universe. And then at some point, they transfer energy by decaying little by little. But then at some point, it's over when it's basically when it comes for them to massively decay. The big difference now is that the entropy production can be substantially larger. This is a well-known thing just because from inflation, for instance. But let me elaborate a little bit. So it's more complicated to estimate the entropy produced. Basically, to a large extent, you need to solve Boltzmann equation to see what happens. But this has been worked out long ago by Scherrer and Turner, and it's classic stuff. But the key thing here is that the final result, if you want, is that the ratio of the final entropy to the initial entropy. So again, initially, all the entropy is in the hidden sector. At the end, it's mostly in the standard model. As a prefactor, which is the same prefactor I showed you in the case of thermalization, time now a factor that explicitly involves the decay rate of the dark photon. Or more precisely, the lifetime of the dark photon over another time scale, which is nothing but the time when the dark photon becomes non-relativistic. And you see that it scales like the square root of this ratio. Then, basically, the later the decay, or the larger time span between these two moments, the larger the entropy produced. So I'm going to skip that. This is basically to emphasize that we have not only numerical, but also analytical understanding of the different possibilities. So this is to recap, okay? So I've assumed a dark sector with T prime much larger than T prime over T constant initially. I've assumed that dark matter abundance happens in the hidden sector from secluded freeze-out. And then we have dark photons floating around, but eventually we need to ask that they transfer their heat to the standard model, preferably before BBN, And there are two ways to do so. One is that if the dark photons are relativistic, when this process is over, we have thermalization, basically. Temperature are the same. If they are non-relativistic, if they become non-relativistic before this process happens, then re-heating happens through the real decay of the dark photon, but then that comes with a large production of entropy. So I think I have like 10 minutes. Yes, you have a question?
Just a question.
Yes.
In your Boltzmann equations, for
it's
this...
always you, when you ask a question that I lose my pointer, so you should stop asking questions.
No, I mean, when you consider your Boltzmann equations,
Yes.
you only consider the decays of the dark photon?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a good question. Let me, sorry, I interrupt you, because I think I know the question. The question is why this is the only important process. Well, of course, there are other processes, but it's easy to show that this process is the dominant process.
Okay.
Okay, so basically it's parametric thing, etc. You can have other processes, like for instance, with the emission of a photon, etc., etc. So it's basically, it's actually well known, and it has been studied in different contexts by other people for other problems. But that the most important process is, and that's true, for instance, for freezing also, is for freezing, it's really fermion, antifermion going from the standard model going into dark photons. That is the dominant process for the production of, say, of dark photons. Okay, but that's a very good question, but okay, I skip that point. So let me come to the constraints, because I want to, I have 10 minutes left. Sorry, I think, is that correct? 10 minutes, huh?
Usually there are some flexibility, it can be a bit more, it's okay.
I'll try to make clear what I want to show. So there are two things I want to show now. One is what are the constraints on the dark photon parameter space, and then in a second time, the constraint on the dark matter parameter space, okay? So dark photon constraints are basically constraints on the mass of the dark photons and the kinetic mixing parameter. So that region is excluded because I want the dark photon to decay before BBN, okay? That constraint is because I don't want the dark sector to thermalize from the outset with the visible sector. It's clear that if the coupling, the kinetic mixing is too large, well, T prime over T is equal to 1 right away. And so there is no dark sector history. There is no history. Okay. So we are within this white region. That's a theoretical constraint I put. It's not really a constraint, but what I ask is that for a given choice of mass for the dark matter, I ask the dark photon is lighter. So the dark photon for a given choice of dark matter must be lighter than that. Okay. Then interestingly, there are constraints in this range. So the interesting part is the white region, so to speak. Okay. There are astrophysical constraints, but there are also beam dump constraints. So that's interesting because, I mean, that means that beam dump experiments are probing potentially parameter space that are relevant for this kind of exotic but not impossible history of the universe. And then finally, in this plot, I delineate basically candidates, dark photons, for which the history is such that they will thermalize when they are relativistic. So here we have thermalization. Basically, the two sectors reach the same temperature, or the visible sector is heated up by the decay of the dark photon. So that happens when the dark photons are relativistic at the moment of thermalization. That part of the parameter space corresponds to cases where the dark photon becomes non-relativistic before thermalization. And so basically, this is what I said. Epsilon is smaller, it's long-lived. If it's long-lived, then it can become non-relativistic before thermalization, and then you have this separation between the two two scenario. Okay, so that's basically, so I mean, basically beam-dump experiment will probe part of parameter space for which the dark photon and the visible sector in the dark sector, they thermalized, or they could have thermalized, even though there was much more energy in the dark sector. What about the dark matter constraints? This I'm going to show in, so this is also something personal. I'm going to show that in something which is called the domain of thermal dark matter particles. So what is this domain? Well, basically the two important things for us is that here we have the mass of the dark matter, and here we have the ratio of the hidden sector, or the dark sector, over the temperature of the visible sector. And basically, the white region is supposed to encompass all the possible thermal candidates, that is, particles that were in thermal equilibrium in a hidden sector, and then had basically a freeze-out, secluded freeze-out, so to speak, if you want. It's a generalization of something which is very classic. This is a classic plot in the dark matter business. It's the case of Dirac neutrino dark matter. This is the Willy-Weinberg solution. Basically, the boundary of the domain are given by, on the one hand, neutrinos that basically freeze out when they are still relativistic. So this is what is usually called hot dark matter. And on the other extreme, it's neutrinos that are super heavy. And but basically, their abundance is set by assuming the largest possible annihilation cross-section allowed by unitarity. And then you have a range of possibilities. And if I put that in the domain, well, of course, this corresponds to the case where T prime is equal to T. You know, basically particles that are in equilibrium with the standard model. But then you can extend that for what would be called a hot hidden sector with T prime larger than T, or a cold hidden sector with temperature less than that. Okay, so very quickly, this region basically generalizes the case of freeze out when the particles are relativistic. So really, I'm focusing on dark matter now. You can forget the dark photon for a moment. Okay. So here in the blue region, basically the dark matter would be underabundant. Okay, so you would need another dark matter. That region generalizes the unitarity bond. Okay, so anything on the right of that region would be overabundant. And then you see that if you change the parameter, if you take the temperature of the hidden sector as an extra free parameter, well, you extend the range of possibilities. That region is basically to ask that the dark matter is not dominating the expansion of the universe at the time of Big Bang, which is something, of course, we don't want to have. And then you can draw, so this is very general range, but then you can draw specific cases. This is a dark QED again. And basically, for different choice of alpha prime, in this case, you have different solutions. The largest alpha prime, the closest you get to the unitarity wall. Okay, so this coupling, the alpha prime here is larger here than for this candidate. And if you increase the coupling, you get closer to that. Now, to come to one of the important conclusions of this work is basically to understand what is the impact of the heating process by dark photons. Okay, because basically there are two things. There is the dark matter, its abundance, etc. But you need to dump the energy from dark matter companions, and so we have studied that in the framework of dark QED, but it's trying to draw general conclusions. So here, basically, we have the same limit as by neglecting the heat transfer. And so basically, this is assuming thermalization, because thermalization is very mundane process. There is little entropy production in particular. Now, if the lifetime of the dark photon becomes larger, the dark photon now, okay, then we could have a large entropy production. That means that this limit here can move to the right. How far to the right? Well, we are basically setting a limit by asking the longest possible lifetime for the companion particle, here the dark photon. That is, we ask that the dark photon decays before BBN. So we have to imagine a scenario here where dark matter is super strongly interacting with dark photons. So that's a unitarity limit. And then the dark photon is so weakly coupled to the standard model that is going to decay the latest possible, compatible with the fact that we know that at BBN, there was basically the usual expansion of the universe. And in between, you have all the other possibilities. So this is extreme decay, the latest decay possible. This is thermalization. And in between, we have all the effects, basically, of dilution due to entropy. I don't know if I can see that clearly. Yes, if you look at basically, so what is the key thing here, of course, is that the dark matter, if you have large entropy production, well, the dark matter can be diluted, okay? I remind you that the dark matter abundance is basically fixed by the ratio of the dark matter particles over the entropy, but if you have entropy production after dark matter freeze out, you have dilution, and this is the dilution factor. This is another way to put it, okay? So you see that from this perspective, it's perhaps simpler. You see that if the lifetime of the dark photon is long, the abundance of the dark matter decreases, and so that can be compensated by increasing the mass of the dark matter, okay? And this is why we go from this boundary to a boundary that moves to the right, that is toward the larger dark matter masses. So let me skip that and this and this, and come, yes, so this is not very important. Let me come to basically, what I think is the take-home message. So basically, this is the take-home message, okay? Here we have the dark photon constraints. Here we have the dark matter constraints. We constrain different things. Here is the mass of the dark photon versus the coupling to the standard model. Here is the temperature ratio in the hidden sector versus the mass of the dark matter. And in this region, for all this region of the parameter, basically it's a scenario in which dark matter belongs to a dark sector that was initially extremely hot, but then somehow through the coupling of the dark photon to the visible sector, the residual energy density in the dark sector got transferred to the visible sector through the heating. And there are two different scenarios. Either it happens when the dark photons were still relativistic, so we call that thermalization. This corresponds to this part of the parameter space. Or it could have happened when the dark photons were non-relativistic, in which case you can have large entropy production that moves the bond and that can extend the mass range, being the mass range of the dark matter candidates toward the right. One of the take-home message perhaps is that usually we think of freeze-out particles as a particle in the few GeV to a few tens of TeV range. In this kind of scenario, the mass of the dark matter could be all the way up to 10 to the 10 GeV. Just a coincidence, there was a paper 2 days ago by Bernal, Connard, Shaw, where basically they show the same thing, different consideration, but similar conclusion. That is imagining that there was a phase of exotic expansion in the early universe. In our case, it's dominated by a hidden sector, where you can push the mass of dark matter toward very, very large masses. So I'm basically last slide for my conclusions. What are the possible other implications? I did not have time to discuss that, but there is something very obvious that is bad or interesting, the way depending on the way you put it, regarding this kind of scenario, is that when you transfer energy from a hidden sector to a visible sector, you're also diluting whatever was already existing as a relic in the visible sector. One possibility, of course, is the baryon asymmetry. Imagine that there was something like leptogenesis, while the expansion of the universe was dominated by a hot dark sector. Then many things change. I mean, the expansion rate is controlled by the hidden sector, while say the rate for leptogenesis or whatever baryon number violation, I don't know what, okay, is within the visible sector, okay? So that changes the picture in two ways. First, the dynamics changes, but also you have a dilution of the baryon asymmetry. It's like inflation, if you want. You dump a lot of energy density that comes from fresh, from new, and so you dilute anything else that was there before. Okay, so there are similarities. I mean, of course, although I mean up to some point with inflation. So there is dilution anyway. So that means that in this kind of scenario, I've been considering if you want to have baryogenesis, there are two ways. One is to have a large baryon asymmetry, which gets diluted after transfer of energy, or baryogenesis is a low-scale process. Or low, well, it depends on the parameter and the models, etc., etc. Of course, the extreme case, and thus very unlikely, is that baryogenesis happened just before BBN. So that's an extreme situation that is very unlikely. But if you think about something else, like first order phase transition, one of the ways to do baryogenesis is to do baryogenesis at the electroweak scale, assuming that there was a first order phase transition. That's one of the prerequisites. Well, here, the first order phase transition could have happened when the expansion was dominated by a hot hidden sector, okay? And so, yeah, that changes the rule, basically. And so that's potentially something interesting to investigate. And then one possible question is also the link with inflation. And this is basically what I'm currently doing. That is, to which extent you can actually manage to do that, to have a hot hidden sector, etc., in a self-consistent way, etc. So different game, different rules, and different perspectives and prospects. Voila, okay. So I'm basically done. I'm a bit late, sorry for that. But thank you for the few questions. And we lost some participants, but not too many, so I'm glad. Okay.
Thank you very much, Michel, for the very nice and very complete talk. Question from the audience? Michael, could you please comment a bit more about this link with inflation? Are you going to consider some specific inflationary models, some inflationary model inspired in grand unified theory, or?
Yeah, I can comment about that. Let me see if I can go. Well, okay, that's an instance. Okay, you see that basically what I'm thinking is that this T prime over T being a constant is a well-defined hypothesis. Okay, something that could go wrong is the following. I mean, if you have so much energy density in the hidden sector, okay, then it's always evolving. There is always energy transfer. It's like after inflation, basically. So it means that when we do inflation, we cannot just say, oh, I put all the energy density in the dark sector. You want to keep a balance between the two. But so that means that you also have a coupling between the inflaton, the visible sector, and the inflaton and the dark sector. And so there is an extra coupling between the two, okay? So it's not only kinetic mixing, so to speak, but also inflaton exchange. So two possibilities. You have kinetic mixing and the inflaton, or can you do the whole thing just with the inflaton being the portal between the visible sector and the dark sector? So different scenarios like that, like what we are considering. But in a bottom-up approach, again, just by using the ingredients that we need to study or to explore this problem.
Thank you, Michael. More question from the audience?
Just this plateau that
yes.
Appeared there. What's the reason behind that?
Oh, but that's okay. Let me emphasize again. It's basically the reason is that okay. I lost my pointer, but perhaps I can get it back. Voila, I get it back. Let me. Okay, sorry. Where is it now? Okay. Oh, sorry. Voila. Okay, that's as good as a plot as another one. You see that I advocated this parameter as being the control parameter. It's going to tell me when energy transfer is going to be efficient or not, basically. Okay. So if you look at these curves, okay, you have a plateau. So decoupled visible sector and dark sector when this parameter is less than 1. But this parameter is evolving just because this ratio is evolving. So it's evolving, okay? And at some point, this number becomes other one. And this is when you have the heating, basically. Okay? So that's something I've never been discussed because it was not important for other people. But it's important here, and I like it very much because this parameter is one throughout. It stays basically constant during eating. You can see it also, for instance. Damn. Okay, sorry. Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay. Here we see it very clearly. You see this parameter is basically the product of this quantity times 1 over this quantity. Okay? So if they are equal, one times the other one is 1. Okay? So, or if you want the ratio of this quantity and that quantity is 1. And this is bang the condition, okay? Before it's smaller, and then the system are decoupled. Then eventually, because the rate increases, the ratio of the rates increases in time, they start to dump energy. It's like well, I want to push it too much, but it's a bit of a generalization of the standard criteria, which is the ratio of rate. It's the ratio of rate times how much you have in the relative reservoir. Usually, you don't consider that because usually the ratio of reservoir is constant, is the same, is order 1 if you want. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah. Perfect.
Voilà.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the questions. That makes my life very interesting during this hour.
More questions from the audience? If there are no more questions, we thank Michel for the very nice and very complete talk, and we meet at the next seminar. Thank you so much, Michel.
Okay, thank you for the invitation and best regards, and I hope to see you next, well, not this January, but in 2025 or so. Okay, take care. Huh? Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Nice to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.